Hello viewers, in the last program we looked at different components of this great novel. Now let us look at the different stages of this novel and try to understand what exactly Samskara means. The first introduces us to the routine activities of Praneshacharya. The activities are an interesting mix of religious and domestic rituals. He begins his day by nursing and bathing his sick wife. It is understood from the first line, he bathed Bhagirathi's body, that she is almost a vegetable. It is he who bathes her, dresses her up, feeds her with the essential food and administers with regular medicine. Then he crosses a small brook to reach a Murthy temple, which is on the other side of the brook, and returns home after worshipping to continue with the recitation of his holy verses. The Brahmins of the Agrahara, who respect him a lot, would become his audience to listen to his recitation and philosophical discourses every day. Praneshacharya sacrifices his life with a purpose. His wife realizes his pain and agony, that he is not enjoying the marital bliss that he lacks. Sometimes she suggests him to get married to another woman, which he denies, and have a blissful home. Nevertheless, Praneshacharya refuses the proposal with strong faith in Lord Krishna's will, that one should not expect any reward for one's own destiny or toil. Moreover, every day when they would eat, both of them request the other to eat first. These incidents show the mutual love between the two and concern they have for each other. One day, as per ritual, he was about to feed the cow Gauri with the fodder, and suddenly he hears Chandri's agonized voice behind him calling him Acharya. Chandri is a low caste woman and a whore. Acharya was in two minds before he interacts with her. He was unable to decide whether to continue with the conversation because that would pollute him. But he could not avoid and listens to the unpleasant news of Naranappa's death after suffering from a 4-day-long fever. According to the Brahmin community, it was considered wrong to have food before performing the funeral rites of the dead. Acharya runs out hurriedly to inform his fellow Brahmins to do the same, that is, not to have food before Naranappa's funeral rites are performed. Every soul in the Agrahara has a negative impression. Now look at these sentences. Alive, Naranappa was an enemy. Dead, a preventer of meals. As a corpse, a problem, a nuisance. The Brahmins of the village assemble before Praneshacharya's house to listen to his instructions to solve the problem of Naranappa's funeral rites. The women folk were scared and prayed that their husbands should not accept to perform the funeral rites. Praneshacharya lists two problems which were to be solved immediately. The first is performing funeral rites for Naranappa, and second is somebody has to take initiative to perform the rites, since Naranappa was childless. Garudacharya, Dasacharya, a poor Brahmin of Agrahara, and Lakshmanacharya agree with Acharya's words. When Praneshacharya announces that Naranappa's relatives should only perform his funeral rites, everyone starts looking at Garuda and Lakshmana. Lakshmana refuses to perform the rites, and Garuda gives explanation and refuses by recalling or citing a family dispute as an example and denies to perform the rites. Naranappa's illicit affair with Chandri also becomes a hurdle. Others also join the argument. Pranishacharya quickly notices that the discussion was not focused. He asks Lakshmana to give a valid reason for his refusal. Lakshmana repeats Garuda's statement and highlights Narnappa's vices. Ansuya, wife of Lakshmana, feels proud of her husband for his reply and curses Chandri for all the problems she has caused in her family. Chandri silently observes the situation and places all her ornaments, gold ornaments, before Pranishacharya and requests him to use for the expenses of the funeral rites. The ornaments attract the greedy looks of other Brahmin wives. The husbands also think that some other Brahmin should not do the funeral rites and take away all the ornaments. Durga Bhatta, who was also waiting to attack Madhva Brahmins, was also lusting after gold ornaments. There was a cold war between Smartha and Madhva Brahmins because of Durga Bhatta. Pranishacharya pleads Durga Bhatta to be silent as it is necessary to inform about the death of Narnappa since he was their friend. The family of Lakshmanacharya and Garudacharya are troubled by the pronouncement of Pranishacharya because the golden ornaments would be taken away by the person who performs the funeral rites. Now secretly all the Brahmins wanted to perform the funeral rites, but they were not able to express the same in open. Lakshmanacharya's wife Anasuya logically tries to claim the ornaments for her family as they are her dead sister's jewelry. But Garuda says, according to the decision of Dharmasthala, Guru, that is chief, the ornaments should go to him. Pranishacharya silences both of them and requests them to give importance to funeral rites and not to the gold ornaments. Describes the houses in Agrahara, the place occupied by the houses of Brahmins of Durvasapura. All the houses appear to be the same except for the kind of flowers grown at the garden or the backyard of every house. The Brahmins happily go to each other's house and get flowers for worship, and they also get to know the welfare of others. It was a kind of ritual they followed, a simple yet friendly ritual. But Narnappa's house was not visited by a single soul because the flowers grown there were meant for Chandri's hair. And Narnappa's house was also known for keeping snakes to protect the gold he had. Madhva Brahmins sent by Pranishacharya from this well-known place of Durvasapura to Parijatapura to inform about Narnappa's death and also to inquire whether they would be willing to perform the funeral rites for him. The Brahmins who lived in Parijatapura were Smarthas. Their first visit to Manjaya's house, where they were treated as guests with all possible hospitality, felt very happy after reaching that place. Parijatapura Brahmins give their consent to perform the rites because he mingled with them very easily. Narnappa was a friend to them without any caste pride, and they also considered it as a pride performing rites for a high caste Brahmin because Narnappa was a Madhva Brahmin. Shankar Raya, Parijatapura priest, advocates that it is important to perform rites immediately for a Brahmin without delaying further. He says, according to a Brahmin, even snakes are born twice, and so proper funeral rites should be performed. But when Durga Bhatta doubts the caste of Narnappa, Shankar Raya hesitates because he does not want his people to do anything non-Brahminical, and he refuses. He suggests them to go along with Pranishacharya's instructions. Pranishacharya refers to religious texts for proper Naranappa's funeral rites, while the Madhva Brahmins are in Parijatapura to inform about Naranappa's death. He recollects Naranappa's vices and misdeeds. He also remembers how people scorned at his presence. He abhorred the way Naranappa made Garuda's son Shama and Lakshmana's son-in-law Shripati to go astray from Brahmanical tradition. Shama fled home and joined the army, while Shripati followed the footsteps of Naranappa. He even remembers the day when he brought Muslims with him to the Ganapati temple stream and caught the sacred fish. There are different views prevail for Garudacharya's son Shama deserting his home. Garudacharya's enemies blame him for punishing Shama severely. Naranappa's enemies blame Naranappa for inciting Shama to run away from home. Shama's parents Garudacharya and Sita Devi are left in lurch, unable to trace Shama. Shama's mother fasts on Friday nights with the hope that her son would return home. After a gap of 3 months, they get the news through a letter that he has joined army and a penalty of 600 rupees should be paid for his release. Sita Devi hopes that her husband might get a chance to perform the funeral rites and earn some gold to release her son. Garudacharya does not want his situation to become like that of Naranappa. Nevertheless, he needs to redeem his only son so that on his death his son would perform his funeral rites. He tries to persuade Acharya to allow him to perform the funeral rites. If so, he would get the golden ornaments of Chandri and that would help him to redeem his son from the army. He tries to convince that for the sake of dharma, a requirement could be fulfilled. He speaks about dharma and life because the motive gold, but Pranesh Acharya is stubborn and is busy going through the text to find an apt solution. Meanwhile, Anasuya also tries to get the golden ornaments. Anasuya is related to Naranappa and her sister is Naranappa's first legal wife. Anasuya does not want her husband to perform funeral rites for Naranappa earlier, but after knowing that she would get Chandri's gold, she sheds tears and tries to establish the bond. All emotions revolve around the gold and not Naranappa's dead body or the funeral rites. Anasuya nurtures her anger against Naranappa because he has spoiled her son-in-law Shripati. When Lakshmanacharya, her husband, comes home tired from Parijatapura, Anasuya urges him to go to Praneshacharya's house and convince him to get the permission to perform the funeral rites for Naranappa. Lakshmanacharya is an epitome of stinginess. He tries to get even oil for his head without spending money and tries to sell cups made of dry banana leaves. Now, he fixes his eyes on Chandri's gold. Lakshmanacharya and Garudacharya vie with each other in getting the gold. Later, they come to an agreement that the gold should be submitted to the court or given to him according to the decree given by Dharmasthala or local court. Meanwhile, Dasacharya complains of the rotten smell and urges Praneshacharya to dispose Naranappa's body. Acharya tries to find solution in the religious texts till late evening, but he is unable to find them. Introduces us to a shocked Sripati who is not aware of Naranappa's death, and he is out of Durvasapura to Srinali. He joins a drama troupe from Kelur and is unaware of Naranappa's death. After spending time with the drama troupe, on the night of Naranappa's death, he walks through a dense forest to Durvasapura. While nearing Durvasapura, he sees a hut burning in the light of the fire. He sees Belli walking to a bush after having baths in warm water. He tries to express his love to her, but she prevents him, saying that if he does so, he would die due to some supernatural power. She says Pilla and his women died and they burned their bodies in their hut. Belli attributes their deaths to some unknown demonic power. Shripati is scared and he goes to Naranappa's house, thinking of spending the night at his residence. Since the door is open, he hesitatingly enters the house and sees dead rats lying on the floor. Then, when he sees Naranappa lying on the floor, he thinks he is asleep. But when he removes the blanket, he finds his body as cold as a dead rat. Lakshmi Devamma, an old lady, is associated with ill fate and bad luck in Agrahara. She was given in marriage at the age of 8, but at the age of 10, she lost her in-laws, and at the age of 20, she lost her parents. After Lakshmi Devamma became an orphan, Garudacharya's father takes care of her and grabs her property. Later, the responsibility of taking care of Lakshmi Devamma fell on Garuda. But Garudacharya's wife ill-treats Lakshmi Devamma, and the incessant quarrel between Garuda's wife and Lakshmi Devamma makes Garuda keep Lakshmi Devamma in a separate ruined house and gives 1 rupee every month for her sustenance. Lakshmi Devamma takes the matter to Praneshacharya, but Garudacharya does not relent. Therefore, whenever she is annoyed with Garudacharya, she stands in front of his house and hurls curses at him from the bottom of her heart. One day, she sees somebody running out of Naranappa's house, and she thinks that it is Naranappa's ghost fleeing from his house. Lakshmi Devamma bangs at the door of the houses in Agrahara and tries to inform the people. But it is Shripati fleeing out of Naranappa's house after seeing Naranappa's dead body. He is as pale as a ghost, and he crosses Tunga river and reaches Nagaraja's house at Parijatapura. Chandri, lying in the veranda of Praneshacharya, notices that it is Shripati fleeing out of her house. She is able to notice him as hunger pangs keep her awake. She has never slept without having food at night. Hence, she goes to the backyard and eats ripe plantain left on the tree. Then goes to Tunga river and drinks water. She, being afraid of going to her own house, goes back to Praneshacharya's house and curls up on the veranda to sleep, covering her face with her sari. Praneshacharya, meanwhile, is still trying to find an apt solution through religious texts, but he does not find any satisfactory answer. He walks restlessly along the veranda and reflects on 2 reasons for not excommunicating Naranappa. The first reason is Naranappa always threatened that he would get converted as a Muslim. And the other reason was Praneshacharya's compassion towards Naranappa. He was quite confident that Naranappa could be convinced and he can be brought back to normal life. But that did not happen when he was alive. Compassion is a trait of Praneshacharya, which is obvious in his family life as well. He is so compassionate towards his disabled wife, sick wife who is of no use to him. His mind then shifts to another solution, as going through religious texts for a solution has gone in vain. He thinks of going to a temple of Maruti early next morning and fall at the feet of God to get a solution to the problem. The thought of going to Maruti's temple relaxes his stressed mind. Then he gives Chandri, who is in the veranda, a mat and a pillow to sleep, and he gets inside his house. Again, he gets another thought that he should give all her jewels or return all her jewels back to her, and he acts accordingly. Then he goes to his bed. Dasacharya, who constantly complains about the stink that was spreading fast in the village, was unable to tolerate the harsh law that adults should not eat food until proper funeral rites are given to the dead Naranappa. He is unable to control his hunger, and added to his anguish, the aroma of food being prepared for children in the Agrahara tickled his taste buds. He finally decides to have food and goes to the Tunga river without being noticed by anybody. At the river, he takes baths and goes to Manjaya's house in Parijatapura. He meets Manjaya at lunchtime. Manjaya eats uppittu, a kind of dish prepared in Karnataka, worsens his hunger further. He salivates at the sight of the food, but pretends as if he has come to discuss the nature of his people. In order to please Manjaya, he criticizes all men who visited Parijatapura the previous day to know whether any Smartha Brahmin would be willing to perform the rites for Naranappa. Manjaya knows that Dasacharya would be willing to have food with him and asks him whether he has had baths, and Dasacharya says that yes, he had a dip in the river. Manjaya offers food to him. Dasacharya's desire to eat food and the fear that his people would not invite him for any meal if they come to know that he has had food before Naranappa's funeral rites brings forth petulance against his people and remarks that they are rascals. When Manjaya promises that he would never allow this act of his to leak, and then Dasacharya accepts to eat. Nevertheless, he says that he would not eat cooked food and asks for plain flat rice mixed with sugar and milk. But then, when he is offered 4 spoonfuls of uppittu, he eats that as well, and then he chooses the plantain leaf for courtesy's sake, saying that he must leave some food for Manjaya's family. The stink of dead rats and Naranappa's dead body makes the night creepy and restless for many in the Agrahara. In Dasacharya's house, except him, everybody smells the stench. Belli is not able to sleep in her hut. After they burn the hut of Pilla in order to cremate him and his wife, there is darkness. Belli, as she needs light in her hut, goes to a nearby bush where she sees fireflies, glowworms, twinkling in the dark night. She catches fireflies and also finds dead rats in the feeble light illuminated from the fireflies. In the morning of the second day of Naranappa's death, the women try to stop their children from going out, thinking that Naranappa's ghost roams the Agrahara and it might touch their children. But then, Venkataramanacharya's children go against their mother's order and they are excited to see rats dying. The Brahmins of the Agrahara meanwhile gather to find a quick solution to Naranappa's funeral rites. They are unable to bear the stench emanating from dead rats and from the rotten body of Naranappa. Durga Bhatta and Dasacharya blame the rest of the Brahmins for the delay in Naranappa's funeral rites. Therefore, Garudacharya ignores the problem of claiming Chandri's gold for some time in order to give funeral rites for the dead Naranappa. The Brahmins become impatient but are forced to depend on Pranishacharya for every decision. Hence, they gather in front of his house and when he comes out, he expresses his desire to visit the temple of Maruti in the forest. The Brahmins accept his decision, hoping that Agrahara will become normal again. Praneshacharya then goes to the forest to visit Maruti temple. He takes with him jasmine, champak flowers and basil leaves. After a ritualistic bath in the Tunga river, he replaces his old sacred thread for a new one and walks 2 miles into the forest. At the temple, he cleans the idol and smears sandal paste all over it. Then, sitting in front of the idol, he presents his confused thoughts at the feet of the Lord. He does not find an answer. He is disappointed. He feels very low. Chandri, meanwhile, unable to face the angry Brahmins in the Agrahara, follows Praneshacharya to the forest. While coming to the forest, she takes bananas in the lap of her sari. She also takes a dip in the Tunga river and her body is completely wet. She sits at a distance from the temple watching Praneshacharya. Disillusioned by the complexity of the problem, he slogs back home. On his way, he meets Chandri and he is awestruck by her beauty, and when he wakes up in the middle of the night, he finds himself lying on Chandri's lap. Chandri rushes home, finds that Naranappa's body has started to rot, gets it cremated in secrecy and leaves Durvasapura forever. Praneshacharya is left in a piquant and complex situation on whether he has to disclose his dishonest act to the people of the village or keep quiet about it. Feeling culpable, he leaves the village, but the guilt never leaves him. He is full of remorse. Finally, deciding to own up his act, he returns to the village and the story ends there. To conclude, the writer very brilliantly expects his reader to find solution for all the problems of the society and find the right solution to lead a peaceful and happy life. This is how the Samskara, the novel, concludes. I hope you enjoyed the story written by the great writer U.R. Anantha Murthy. Thank you.